there's no doubt that over the past 20 years, there's a discrepancy between the satellite data and the climate model predictions. And there's even a discrepancy between the climate model predictions and the surface data. But there's many possible reasons for that discrepancy. And I would like to talk about all of them. The way I see it, the one that the contrarians like to glom onto is, the climate model, the sensitivity of the climate models must be wrong. That's one possible explanation. Another possible explanation is, of course, the data are wrong. That's a possibility. But another and probably more important one is that in order for the climate models to do the proper predictions, they have to have the proper input data. So, for example, things like how bright the sun is and how much aerosols from volcanoes is in the atmosphere and exactly what the ozone is doing. All that has to be right, or the climate models aren't going to predict the right thing. And I think there's evidence that all three of those things are slightly wrong in the CMIP5 models. For example, the volcanic aerosols, we always compare with these things called historical runs, where you put in the forcings, these things like how much CO2 there is and how much stuff in the volcanoes there is. You put that into the models, and then you compare that with the data that you actually measured. When they did those runs, they used the historical volcanic measurements up until about 2000, and then it just decayed to background. But the reality is that after 2000, there were a considerable number of small volcanic eruptions that put a bunch of stuff up in the stratosphere that would cool the planet relative to what it would have happened otherwise, and also relative to what the models predict. Another possible reason for the disagreement is just what I would call bad luck, or maybe it's good luck. But both the models and the real system have these fluctuations on the decade-to-decade scale, and if you happen to have a fluctuation where it's cooler now than it was 20 years ago, just by chance, then it looks like you're not getting as much warming as you expected. And there's considerable evidence to back that up too. The more heat has gone into the ocean than the models would predict. The trade winds were much stronger over the past decade than they were before, and this probably stirred up the ocean and mixed some of the heat down into the ocean. So some of that, it's very likely that heat stayed in Earth somewhere, and it's very likely that it went into the ocean instead of warming up the surface and the atmosphere.